Welcome to another Game Nexus video. Today we're going to be looking at Street Fighter the movie on the Sega Saturn. And of course, as I had mentioned, in Japan it's called the Street Fighter Real Battle on film. We're going to be taking a look at it on our Sega Saturn. And before I say anything else, I got to say, this is one of the best controllers for 2D fighters. You don't really get much better than this. So all we do is turn on the system, and let's get right into it. Okay, this is the title screen of the game. And we're going to be selecting the Street Battle mode, which is more or less arcade mode. And of course I'm going to select Cammy here, who is played by Kylie Minogue. And the AI always chooses Sawada as the first character most of the time. Sawada, of course, is played by Kenya Sawada, which is actually the actor's name, surprisingly enough. Now, as compared to the arcade game, this game actually is more modeled off of Super Street Fighter Turbo or Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo X instead of the arcade version, which is a little different. The arcade version flows a little less nicely, whereas this version just seems to play a lot better than the arcade version does. Everything just feels much more Street Fighter-like and less less choppy. The arcade version was really choppy in the sense that whenever you did a move, it just seemed like you were hitting them, then you had to come up and hit them again, but this game just flows just a lot more like Street Fighter. Now what you'll notice here is I've cut out all the load times in this video because, face it, if I had this whole playthrough with all the load times, you would have been watching this video for another 6 minutes and 20 seconds of just watching black screens and screens that said now loading on them. Next up here is Ryu, played by Brian Mann. Now one thing you'll notice in this game as compared to the arcade version is all the music and the backgrounds are completely redone as compared to the ones in the arcade version. All the voices of the characters are done so they sound more similar to the actual original characters in the Street Fighter games.
You win!
These guys in this stage, they just always struck me as really strange. They just keep on doing the same motions over and over again, and they look very cartoony in my opinion. Whereas they really could have made them look a little better, like the guy on the floor. Like, what exactly is he doing? Or the guy next to him. Okay, let's take care of Ryu here. And of course, just like the arcade version, this uses the same digitalized sprites as the arcade version does, but as I had mentioned earlier, everything is just redone by Capcom of Japan, and then it was brought over here to America and published by Acclaim. Okay, that takes care of Ryu. And just like in the original Street Fighter games, you have your taunts. One thing that's interesting is in the Japanese version, when you'd have your taunt there, the actual voice actor who's doing the voice would actually say the taunt in Japanese, whereas here in the American version they actually cut the speech for the taunts out because, simply enough, I guess they didn't want to redub them into English. Next here we have Blanka. He's actually exclusive to the console versions of this game. He wasn't in the arcade versions at all. Which, in my opinion, is pretty cool that they actually added in a couple of characters who actually weren't in the arcade version, but they just added them because they rounded out the roster just a bit better instead of just having everyone who was there. The only character, if you looked at the select screen, that wasn't here, that was in the arcade version, was Akuma. But Akuma is actually a hidden character. I always thought Blanka looked a little bit weird. He stands up a little too straight as compared to his video game counterpart. And he just doesn't seem to slouch and move the same way that the original Blanka did. But still, it was a decent facsimile of Blanca.
Next, fight! Cammy versus Chun-Li.
Next we have Chun-Li here.
Round 1, fight!
Personally, I'm kind of surprised they actually didn't bring T-Hawk into this game, because although he had a minor role in the movie, he still actually was a character in the film. Of course, Blanca, who we just saw, was played by Robert Mamone there. And Chun-Li here is actually played by Ming-Na Wen, who is actually a Chinese actress, which, as I had mentioned in the main review, is really nice to actually see actors and actresses who had the same nationality as the actual character they're portraying. Not everyone just looking the same as they did in the game. They all kind of had this anime, Caucasian type American look, like in most Japanese games. Now this is another one of those stages that I just simply found weird. You're like in a hospital or something with a bunch of mice running around. One thing I was happy about Chun-Li in this game is they didn't actually change her costume to be the same color as it was in Street Fighter, like giving her a blue or white costume. They just kept the actual one from the movie, which was really nice. I always hate when they take something from a film and then they change it too much. Of course, Cammy, I thought it was cool that they actually gave her the green leotard and the beret, like she always had. I always liked the Delta Red Cammy the best, personally. I never really liked the Shadow Lu Cammy as much as I liked the Delta Red. The Shadow Lu Cammy, for you people who don't know, was the one who wore the blue outfit with the blue hat, and it wasn't like a beret, it was just a regular hat, and then she usually just had blue paint on her legs instead of the green like she would have here. In case you haven't guessed it by now, which I'm sure I made it more than apparent in the previous video, Cammy is my favorite Street Fighter character. There's no way around that. She always has been. I liked how they added the super moves into this game, and they just really seem to add a bit to the strategy in the game.
You win!
And it is really cool how you can do that, and then that whole like firework type thing in the background happens. I'm guessing from the between battle cut things there, they couldn't actually make the character look beat up like they did in the Super Street Fighter 2, so they just made the character black and white when they lost. Of course, Vega here, which strangely enough, this costume for Vega doesn't actually have a mask on, which just strikes me as really strange. But Vega's played by Jay Tavere here. And this stage I always thought was really cool because it really just brings back the whole energy of the Vega stage in Street Fighter 2. Plus, it also feels a lot like the movie when Vega was fighting in the cage and all the people were around the cage cheering him on. So this does really fulfill both the style of the movie and the style of the game. You would come to think that since the claw actually had 2P on top of it and had a little arrow pointing down on it, that Vega could actually pick that up, which is quite different from Super Street Fighter 2, where if he lost his claw, that was actually lost for good, and you could never actually regain that. I tend to use the cannon drill a lot, because it's one of the most useful moves Cammy has in this game. For characters like Vega that jump a lot, the thrust kick, or as later as it would be known as the cannon spike, is a much more useful move for characters that jump a lot, such as Vega here. Of course, in the Japanese versions of Street Fighter, he was known as Balrog, but since this is actually based off of the movie where he was known as Vega, they just kept his name the same. Actually, even in the Japanese version, which I also owned for Sega Saturn, but in the manual they mentioned that he was actually called Balrog in the actual game. The original game, I would